hands everyone wants to stand. I roll in my jack, fast like the wind. Everybody's on the boardroom to the streets. I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands. Every woman wants to stand. I roll in my jack, fast like the wind. Every mission I take, you know I'm gonna win. Ladies on my left, danger on the right, but it's love and respect that I'm bringing to the fight.
On the deck with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
Got my eyes on the prize, but my heart's in the beat. J Cats on the mic, bring the heat to the street. When it comes to the ladies, I'm smooth like silk, but don't get it twisted. I'm the man with the milk. For every tear that falls, I'm the hand to hold. In this world of chaos, I'm the story untold. With every breath I take, every move I make, I'm writing my name in the history is fate.
On the deck with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire.
Welcome to the adventures of J Cat, where thrills meet tenderness in a captivating blend of sexy, excitement and romance. Hosted by the adventurous Jay Bahari, this hip podcast invites listeners to embark on exhilarating journeys filled with captivating stories and heartfelt moments. Each episode explores the intriguing intersections of adventure and love, transporting you to breathtaking romance and inspiring tales that will leave you yearning for your own escapades. Whether you're a seasoned traveler, a hopeless romantic, or simply someone who appreciates a great story, J Cat Adventures promises a delightful escape into the extraordinary, sparking your imagination and igniting your wanderlust. Tune in and let the adventures begin.
But I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
My hands everyone wants to stand. I roll in my jack, fast like the wind. Everybody's on the boardroom to the streets. I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands. Every woman wants to stand.
Discover the magic of J Cat Adventures. Immerse yourself in the captivating world of J Cat. Get ready for a thrilling ride, filled with romance, suspense, and crime. All served with a side of classic drama. Every week, a new episode of J Cat the Fearless. It will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you're a fan of the suave and sophisticated James Bond, you'll be hooked on J Cat's adventures. Join the excitement by subscribe to the Jay Bahari podcast for a weekly dose of action-packed entertainment. I am your host, Jay Bahari. Let's go. Savage Jungle, the Amazon Assault. The Amazon jungle full with life, its dense foliage pulsating under the heavy humidity, each leaf and branch seemingly concealing 1,000 unseen dangers. The deeper one ventured, the more treacherous it became. A labyrinth of peril and mystery. It was here, in the heart of this unforgiving wilderness, that J Cat had been sent on one of the most dangerous missions of his career. J Cat's assignment was simple in its command: infiltrate a rogue paramilitary camp, deep within the Amazon, and stop a brutal arms dealer from finalizing a deal that could destabilize governments across the world. But there was nothing simple about the jungle, nothing simple about the operation. The arms dealer, codenamed Jaguar, was a ruthless player in the global black market, and his jungle fortress was more impenetrable than Fort Knox. Dressed in tactical gear that camouflaged him against the thick greens and browns of the jungle, J Cat moved like a ghost through the underbrush. His sharp instincts were heightened. Every crack of a twig, every flutter of wings, every distant growl had him on edge, but he thrived in these conditions. The jungle was a living thing, wild and untamed, and J Cat had learned long ago to become a part of his environment, not fight against it. He had been traveling for days, his only companions the heat, the insects, and the ever-present hum of danger. The mission intel had warned him about the terrain, but no briefing could prepare someone for the sheer claustrophobic intensity of the Amazon. The jungle was alive in more ways than one. Hostile tribes, venomous creatures, and the paramilitary forces of Jaguar prowled the vast expanse. But J Cat wasn't one to back down from a challenge. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the terrain ahead. Somewhere beyond the next rise was the camp where Jaguar and his mercenaries awaited the delivery of a deadly cache of weapons, enough firepower to fuel wars across the world. As he moved, his mind replayed the intel he had received back at HQ. There was more to this mission than simply stopping an arms deal. Rumor had it that Jaguar had hired a secret operative, someone just as dangerous and skilled as J Cat himself. This operative was said to be a former lover of Jaguar who had disappeared years ago after a deadly operation in the Middle East. Her name, Sabi. J-Cat's heart tightened at the thought of Sabby. They had crossed paths before, years ago on a mission in Paris, where their chemistry had been electric, their mutual attraction undeniable. She was a woman of elegance, strength, and cunning, someone who had challenged him in ways he had never been challenged before. And now she was back, on the wrong side of this deadly game. As night fell, J-Cat set up a small camp. The jungle had a way of making time feel irrelevant, and he welcomed the cover of darkness. The stars barely pierced the thick canopy above, and the only light came from the faint glow of his small tactical lantern. He sat quietly, his mind racing through the possibilities of what lay ahead. Would Sabby remember him? Would she fight him? Or was there still a chance to pull her away from the darkness she had fallen into? He had no time for sentimentality, but even he couldn't deny the lingering feelings he had for her. Just as J-Cat closed his eyes for a brief rest, the crack of a twig nearby snapped him to full alert. His hand instinctively went to his sidearm. He listened, every muscle in his body tensed, waiting. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was Sabby. "J-Cat," she whispered, her voice smooth and full of danger. "I should have known you'd come." He stood, weapon in hand but pointed to the ground, his eyes locked on hers. The years hadn't dulled her beauty, if anything, they had sharpened it. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her eyes blazing with the intensity of someone who had seen too much, endured too much. But there was still something vulnerable behind her sharp exterior, something that J-Cat could never forget. "Sabby," he replied, keeping his voice low. "You shouldn't be here." She tilted her head, a sly smile crossing her lips. "Neither should you. But here we are." There was a moment of tense silence as the two stared at each other, the jungle humming around them. J-Cat knew he couldn't let his feelings get in the way of the mission, but seeing Sabby now, standing before him after all these years, brought a rush of memories. "I know why you're here," she said, her voice a seductive whisper. "You think you can stop Jaguar. But it's already too late, J-Cat. The deal is done. The weapons are on their way." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Then why warn me?" "Because I'm not the enemy you think I am." Her voice was softer now, and J-Cat could hear the sincerity beneath her words. "I didn't come here to help Jaguar. I came to stop him. You have to trust me." J-Cat's mind raced. Could he trust her? Sabby had always been a wild card, someone who played both sides to her advantage. But there was something in her eyes now, something different. She wasn't lying. "Fine," J-Cat said, lowering his weapon but not his guard. "We stop him together. But if you betray me—" "I won't," she cut in, stepping closer to him. "Not this time." And so, the unlikely alliance was forged. Together, they made their way toward the heart of Jaguar's operation. The jungle seemed even more alive now, as if it knew the storm that was coming. J-Cat and Sabby moved in perfect sync, their years of training and experience making them an unstoppable force. As they approached the heavily fortified camp, J-Cat could see the true scale of Jaguar's operation. Dozens of armed mercenaries patrolled the perimeter, and deep in the center of the camp was a massive shipment of weapons, enough to turn the tide of any war. The assault was swift and brutal. J-Cat and Sabby moved like shadows through the camp, taking down guards with silent precision. When they finally reached Jaguar's inner sanctum, the confrontation was inevitable. Jaguar was a hulking figure, his face twisted in a cruel sneer. "J-Cat," he spat, "I've heard a lot about you." "And you must be Jaguar," J-Cat replied, his voice cold and steady. "This ends now." The battle was intense, gunfire, hand-to-hand combat, the clash of wills between two men who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. In the end, it was Sabby who delivered the final blow, her dagger slicing through Jaguar's defenses and ending his reign of terror once and for all. As the smoke cleared and the jungle once again returned to its oppressive silence, J-Cat and Sabby stood over Jaguar's lifeless body. The mission was over, but their story was far from finished. "You didn't have to come back for me," J-Cat said quietly. Sabby looked at him, her eyes softening. "Maybe I did." And in that moment, as the first light of dawn began to break through the canopy, J-Cat knew that despite all the chaos and danger, there was still a chance for redemption, for both of them. The Amazon had tested them, but it had not broken them. The dawn crept slowly over the horizon, casting an eerie golden glow over the remnants of the battle. The once formidable jungle fortress, now reduced to smoking debris, stood as a testament to J-Cat and Sabby's victory. But the jungle, wild and indifferent, swallowed the sounds of destruction, as if nothing had ever happened. It was a reminder that even in triumph, the Amazon remained undefeated, a force beyond human control. J-Cat holstered his weapon and took a deep breath, the weight of the mission finally sinking in. He glanced over at Sabby, who stood with her back to him, watching the rising sun through the dense foliage. Her hair, damp with sweat in the mist of the jungle, clung to her face, but she seemed unfazed by the chaos they had just unleashed. The hard edge she carried moments ago softened as she allowed herself a brief moment of peace. "Jaguars down," J-Cat said, his voice low, but it cut through the thick air like a knife. "But this isn't over. You know that, right?" Sabby turned to face him, her eyes shadowed by a mixture of exhaustion and lingering emotion. "It's never over, J-Cat. Not for people like us." She paused, searching his face as if looking for something unspoken. "But this is a start. You stopped him, and you saved a lot of lives today." J-Cat shook his head, his expression hardening. "We stopped him, Sabby, and you saved me just as much as I saved you back there." Her lips twitched into the slightest of smiles, a rare gesture from the hardened woman he once knew. But even now, with the mission complete, there was still tension between them, years of unresolved feelings and mistrust lingering in the humid air. "Why did you come back, Sabby?" he asked, his voice quieter this time. He knew he shouldn't ask. Knew the question opened wounds that might never heal. But he couldn't stop himself. Not after everything they had been through, not after all the loss. Sabby's expression turned unreadable, her eyes flicking away from his for the briefest moment. "Why do you think, J-Cat?" she whispered, her voice almost drowned out by the cacophony of the jungle coming to life around them. "Maybe I was tired of running. Tired of living in the shadows. Or maybe," she hesitated, taking a deep breath, "maybe I needed to face what I left behind." J-Cat's chest tightened. He didn't like emotions, they complicated things, clouded judgment. But with Sabby, everything had always been complicated. "You left a lot behind," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "But I never thought you'd come back to this." Sabby's gaze sharpened, and she stepped toward him, her voice taking on an edge. "And what did you think, J-Cat? That I'd disappear forever? That I'd turn my back on everything we fought for?" She shook her head, her frustration clear. "I couldn't stay away. Not this time." The truth lay between them, heavy and unspoken. J-Cat knew there was more to Sabby's return than she was letting on. The jungle, the mission, it was all a backdrop to something much deeper. Something neither of them had faced in years. But there was no time to unpack it. Not now. The comms device in J-Cat's ear crackled to life, breaking the moment. "Bravo team, report," the voice on the other end barked. J-Cat pressed a finger to his earpiece. "Mission accomplished. Target neutralized. Ready for exfil." "Roger that. Extraction team en route. ETA 15 minutes. Sabby took a step back, her gaze shifting to the horizon. "Looks like it's time to go," she said, the tension between them dissipating into the humid air. But before they could move, a low rumble echoed from the distance, a sound too mechanical to belong to the jungle. J-Cat's instincts kicked in, his hand immediately gripping the handle of his weapon. "That doesn't sound like an extraction team," Sabby muttered, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We've got company." From the tree line, a convoy of armored vehicles emerged, their engines roaring like angry beasts. Mercenaries, clad in tactical gear and armed to the teeth, spilled out of the trucks, their weapons trained on J-Cat and Sabby. "Looks like Jaguar had some backup we didn't account for," J-Cat said, his voice steady despite the odds. He wasn't surprised. The jungle always had one more surprise waiting in its depths. Sabby's lips curved into a grim smile. "Good thing I never liked making easy exits." J-Cat and Sabby dropped into battle mode, their bodies moving with a fluid precision honed by years of experience. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched. The mercenaries stormed toward them, but J-Cat's movements were like lightning, swift, calculated, and deadly. His silenced shots found their marks, while Sabby darted through the trees, her blade flashing in the dappled sunlight as she took down enemies with ruthless efficiency. The jungle became their battleground. The trees provided cover, but also obstacles, turning the skirmish into a deadly game of cat and mouse. J-Cat fired methodically, each shot deliberate, while Sabby moved with an assassin's grace, taking down her targets with brutal swiftness. But the mercenaries kept coming, wave after wave, seemingly endless. J-Cat ducked behind a large tree trunk, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. "We're not going to last much longer if we don't make a move." Sabby, crouched beside him, nodded. Agreed. We need to break through their line and make it to the extraction point. But these guys are blocking every route out of here. J-Cat's mind worked quickly, eyes scanning the terrain. Then, an idea sparked. The river. Sabby looked at him, eyebrows raised. The river? You're serious? J-Cat's jaw tightened. It's the only way. The current's strong enough to carry us, and they won't expect us to take it. Sabby's hesitation lasted only a second. Fine. But if we die in that river, I'm blaming you. Deal, J-Cat replied with a smirk. Let's go. They broke from cover, sprinting toward the jungle's edge as bullets whizzed past them. The roar of the mercenaries faded into the background as they pushed forward, crashing through thick vines and overgrowth until they reached the riverbank. The water churned violently, a dangerous force of nature, but it was their only shot. After you, Sabby said, her voice tinged with sarcastic amusement. J-Cat didn't hesitate. He leapt into the water, the powerful current immediately dragging him downstream. Sabby followed, her life form slicing through the water as they were swept away, leaving the mercenaries behind on the shore, shouting in frustration. The river carried them deep into the jungle, further from the mercenaries and closer to safety. The extraction team would be waiting downstream, if they could survive the ride. J-Cat fought to keep his head above water, the relentless current pulling him under more than once. But his training kept him sharp, his body moving with the flow rather than against it. Sabby, just ahead of him, seemed to handle the water with surprising ease, her movements graceful even in the raging torrent. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the river's grasp, tumbling onto the muddy banks, soaked and breathless but alive. Well, Sabby said between gasps, that was fun. J-Cat looked at her, his chest heaving from the exertion. Glad you think so. Now let's get to that extraction point before any more surprises show up. They rose to their feet, battered but unbroken, and made their way deeper into the jungle. The extraction point was just ahead, and with it, the promise of safety, for now. But as J-Cat glanced over at Sabby, he couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. The Amazon had tested them both, pushed them to their limits, and yet, in the heart of that savage jungle, something had shifted between them. There was no going back to the way things were before. And J-Cat wasn't sure if he wanted to. The jungle might have let them go this time, but the real battle between them, between loyalty, love, and survival, was only just beginning. The dense jungle pressed in on them from all sides as J-Cat and Sabby trudged through the muck, making their way toward the extraction point. Every step was heavy, their bodies drained by the fierce current they'd fought in the battle they'd just survived. The air around them buzzed with the constant hum of insects, but the silence between them was louder. J-Cat wiped a mixture of sweat and water from his brow, keeping his eyes scanning the area ahead. They were close now, but he wasn't one to let his guard down. He knew all too well that the jungle, like life, had a way of throwing one last curve when you thought the danger had passed. Beside him, Sabby moved with equal caution, her weapon drawn, her eyes sharp as a blade. How much further? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. About a quarter mile, J-Cat replied. He could already hear the distant hum of the chopper blades cutting through the thick air, but he knew better than to breathe easy just yet. Sabby nodded, her gaze flicking toward the treetops. Let's hope we can make it without another welcoming party. They moved in silence for a few minutes more, each step measured, their senses on high alert. And then, the trees parted, revealing a small clearing where the extraction chopper hovered just above the ground, its rotor blades whipping the air into a frenzy. J-Cat's instinct screamed at him, something wasn't right. Wait, he said, grabbing Sabby's arm just before they could step into the clearing. Sabby's eyes darted to him, questioning. What is it? Look at the way the chopper's positioned, J-Cat said, his voice low. That's not standard protocol for an extraction. They're facing us like they're waiting for us, not preparing for a quick getaway. Sabby's brow furrowed as she followed his gaze. You think they're not ours? J-Cat's jaw clenched. I don't think, I know. He pointed to a barely visible detail on the side of the helicopter. Look at the emblem on the tail. It's jaguars. They must have had one last card up their sleeve. As if on cue, the doors of the helicopter slid open, and a squad of armed mercenaries poured out, weapons trained on the tree line where J-Cat and Sabby crouched. They had walked right into a trap. Damn it, Sabby hissed. We're pinned. J-Cat's mind raced. They had no time, no options. But then his eyes flicked toward the thick brush to the left of the clearing. There's a way out, he said, his voice calm despite the danger. We split up. I'll draw their fire, and you circle around to take out the pilot. Sabby shook her head. You'll get yourself killed. Not if I'm quick, J-Cat replied with a determined smirk. Besides, we don't have a choice. If we don't take out that chopper, we're not getting out of here alive. Sabby's gaze locked with his, tension tightening the space between them. But in her eyes, he saw trust, maybe not in him completely, but in their shared ability to survive. Fine, she said. But don't get yourself shot. J-Cat grinned. No promises. Without another word, they split, Sabby disappearing into the jungle brush while J-Cat made his way toward the clearing. He moved swiftly, his feet silent on the jungle floor, and within moments, he was in position. Taking a deep breath, he burst from the tree line, gun blazing, aiming at the squad of mercenaries. Bullets ripped through the air as the mercenaries returned fire, but J-Cat was faster, ducking and weaving through the trees as he picked them off one by one. His heart pounded in his chest, but his focus was razor sharp. He had to keep their attention on him long enough for Sabby to take out the pilot. From the corner of his eye, he saw Sabby slip through the jungle shadows, her body moving with lethal grace. She was almost at the chopper, her movements undetected by the mercenaries too distracted by J-Cat's onslaught. J-Cat dove behind a fallen tree trunk, reloading his weapon in a fluid motion. He could hear the rotor blades intensifying, the chopper readying to lift off. Time was running out. Just as the last mercenary fell to the ground, Sabby reached the helicopter. In one swift motion, she leapt onto the side of the craft and pulled the pilot from his seat, slamming him into the ground with a sickening thud. She didn't hesitate, one clean shot and the pilot was down, permanently. Get in, Sabby shouted over the roar of the blades as she climbed into the pilot's seat. J-Cat didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted toward the helicopter, jumping inside just as Sabby lifted it off the ground. The jungle whipped past them as they gained altitude, the dense canopy shrinking beneath them. J-Cat glanced over at Sabby, who had a fierce look of determination on her face as she expertly piloted the helicopter through the thick jungle air. You fly now? J-Cat asked, half impressed. Sabby flashed a quick grin. I've picked up a few skills since we last worked together. Clearly, J-Cat replied with a smirk, though inside he felt something shift. Sabby wasn't the woman he remembered. She had become even stronger, more capable, and, whether he wanted to admit it or not, he respected her for it. The helicopter sped through the sky, the distant sound of the mercenaries' shouts fading into nothing. J-Cat and Sabby had survived the Amazon, but the tension between them still lingered, unspoken and unresolved. As they flew toward safety, the sun began to set behind them, casting long shadows over the savage jungle below. J-Cat leaned back in his seat, his gaze fixed on the horizon, but his mind drifted to Sabby, to the unfinished business that lay between them. The Amazon had tested them both, and they had passed. But as the jungle receded into the distance, J-Cat knew their real challenges were still ahead. Sabby, he said, breaking the silence. She didn't look at him, her eyes focused on the controls. Yeah? Why did you really come back? This time, she didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that J-Cat hadn't heard before. Because I couldn't let you face this alone. Not again. J-Cat studied her for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Maybe she was right. Maybe, for all the pain and distance between them, they were better together than apart. Good thing you did, he finally said, his voice low. Sabby glanced at him, her eyes softening just for a moment. Yeah, she whispered, good thing. As the helicopter soared into the night, leaving the savage jungle behind, J-Cat knew this wasn't the end. The Amazon assault had only been the beginning. The helicopter sliced through the darkening sky, leaving the chaotic jungle far behind. The rhythmic thrum of the rotor blades filled the cabin, but inside, the silence between J-Cat and Sabby was palpable. Though they had escaped the Amazon's deadly grip, the tension between them had yet to dissolve. J-Cat leaned back in his seat, his gaze flicking between the horizon and Sabby. Her hands were steady on the controls, but there was something about the way her jaw was set, something unresolved, unfinished. I wasn't expecting you to handle yourself like that, J-Cat said, his voice casual but with a hint of admiration. Sabby didn't glance over, but a small, barely noticeable smile touched her lips. Don't tell me you thought I'd just play damsel in distress. J-Cat let out a soft chuckle, his eyes never leaving her. I know better than to underestimate you. It's just been a long time, Sabby. Sabby's smile faded, and for a moment, the only sound was the whirring blades and the hum of the engine. Yeah, she said quietly. A long time. J-Cat studied her profile, her face illuminated by the dim dashboard lights. There was something deeper beneath her words, an undercurrent of emotion she was trying to hide. He felt it too, the weight of their past pressing in on them, unresolved feelings lurking just beneath the surface. What happened back there? J-Cat began, choosing his words carefully. It's not something I've forgotten. Sabby's eyes flicked toward him, her expression unreadable. You never forget anything, do you? No, J-Cat said, his voice low, not when it comes to you. For a moment, Sabby was silent. Her grip on the controls tightened ever so slightly, and J-Cat saw the tension in her shoulders. He could tell she was weighing her words, deciding whether or not to let him in. It wasn't just about the mission, she finally said, her voice quieter now. I didn't come back just to save you, J-Cat. I came back because I wasn't ready to let go. J-Cat felt his chest tighten. He'd spent years burying his emotions, masking his pain behind missions, danger, and the pursuit of revenge. But with Sabby, it was different. She'd always had the ability to see through his defenses, to touch parts of him he thought were untouchable. You don't have to say anything, Sabby continued, her gaze forward, the sky growing darker as they flew. I know we've both changed. We've both lost things. But I had to come back. I had to try. J-Cat's mind raced as he struggled to find the right words. He wasn't the type to express his feelings easily. He had built walls around his heart long ago, and Sabby had been the only one who ever came close to breaking them down. I didn't think I'd see you again, J-Cat said finally, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't intended to show. I told myself it was for the best. And was it? Sabby asked, turning to him now, her eyes locking with his. In the dim light, there was a vulnerability there he hadn't seen before. J-Cat swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his own emotions pressing in on him. No, he admitted. It wasn't. For the first time since they had reunited, Sabby's expression softened, the wall she had built around herself cracking just a little. We're not the same people we used to be, J-Cat, she said. But maybe that's not a bad thing. J-Cat leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. No, he said quietly, maybe it's not. The helicopter dipped slightly as they neared their destination, a small, remote airstrip hidden deep in the mountains. Sabby adjusted the controls, her attention briefly shifting back to the task at hand. But the air between them was different now, lighter, but also charged with the possibilities of what could come next. As they touched down on the gravel airstrip, the sound of the rotors slowing filled the air. The jungle and its dangers were behind them, but the real challenge lay ahead, facing the truth of what they meant to each other after all this time. The moment the chopper settled, Sabby powered down the engine, and silence enveloped them. They sat there for a long moment, neither one moving, as if they were both hesitant to break the fragile peace that had settled between them. J-Cat finally spoke, his voice steady. You said you weren't ready to let go. Neither was I. Sabby's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, he saw hope mingled with the pain in her expression. Then maybe we don't have to. Before either of them could say another word, the distant roar of engines interrupted their moment. J-Cat's instincts kicked in instantly, and he grabbed his weapon, scanning the dark skies above. A convoy of black SUVs appeared at the edge of the airstrip, their headlights cutting through the night. They're here, Sabby muttered, reaching for her own weapon. Her face hardened, the soft vulnerability replaced by the sharp, steely determination he knew all too well. J-Cat stepped out of the chopper, his eyes narrowing as the vehicles approached. Let's get this over with. The SUV screeched to a halt, and a group of men in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn but not immediately hostile. One of the men, a tall figure in a sharp suit, stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto J-Cat. Jaguar sends his regards, the man said with a smirk, clearly unbothered by the destruction J-Cat and Sabby had just left behind in the Amazon. He's impressed. But he's also disappointed you survived. J-Cat's hand tightened on his weapon, his gaze never wavering. Tell Jaguar I'm coming for him. The man chuckled. He's counting on it. But first, we have some unfinished business to attend to. Sabby stepped beside J-Cat, her eyes narrowing as she sized up their new adversary. What now? The man's smirk widened. Now, you pay for the Amazon. And this time, there won't be any escape. J-Cat's eyes flicked to Sabby, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't over. not by a long shot. Together, they turned to face the enemy, ready for whatever came next. And that's a wrap on another thrilling episode of J-Cat Adventures. I hope you've been on the edge of your seat, caught up in the mystery, excitement, and danger that always follows J-Cat wherever he goes. From heart-pounding action to deep emotional connections, J-Cat's world never fails to surprise. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, or click the follow button, so you never miss out on the next big adventure. Whether you're into romance, suspense, or mind-bending mysteries, there's always something more coming. And don't be shy, reach out. You can audio call or audio text chat with me directly. I'd love to know what you want to see next in J-Cat's world or hear your thoughts on today's episode. Want to dive deeper? Explore more of J-Cat's thrilling escapades by grabbing an ebook at www.jcatadventures.com or head over to Amazon for paperbacks and hard copies. Trust me, you'll want to have J-Cat's latest adventure right in your hands. And remember, the podcast continues across your favorite platforms: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Wherever you go, J-Cat is right there, ready to bring you into his world of suspense, romance, and non-stop action. But it doesn't end here. This journey is just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next episode, where J-Cat takes on new challenges, faces dangerous foes, and maybe even finds love in unexpected places. Until next time, keep that spirit of adventure burning bright. The world is filled with endless possibilities, and J-Cat is proof that no mystery is too big to solve. Remember, adventure is thrilling, but the heart's deepest desires are the greatest mysteries of all. Keep chasing passion, stay fearless, and never let love slip through your fingers. This is Jay Bahari, signing off. Stay curious, stay bold, and always keep exploring, because the next chapter of J-Cat Adventures is just around the corner.
Harry is so kind. In the realm of love, the connections bind. Lay out by your side, a symphony unfurls, spreading love across the digital world. Jay Bahari in the cyber sea, a love captain setting spirits free. With AI whispers like a gentle dove, he's on a quest to spread love. In the language of compassion, he decodes old school soul in a digital age. Jay Bahari's love breaking out of rage. It's on a mission.